Okay, this morning we'll be making easy buttermilk biscuits. What I have in the bowl here is 2 cups of flour, a tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 3/4 teaspoons of salt. This is a cup of buttermilk. And I've got 9 tablespoons of butter. 1 butter is just going to be for brushing at the end. And some of you guys may be familiar with this little tool for cutting butter into pastry stuff. This recipe uses a little trick that I've sort of used for most things so I can avoid having to cut butter into flour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this buttermilk in the freezer while I melt this butter. We don't have a microwave, so I'm going to melt it on the stovetop. And this is going to be super cold. We're going to put the warm butter into the buttermilk. It's going to clump up, and then we can pour that directly into the dry goods and not have to worry about messing around with this dude. Cool. So I have the buttermilk that's been in the freezer for about 10 minutes. I don't want that frozen. I just want it really, really cold. And I've melted the 9 tablespoons of butter pretty slowly, so I still got a lot of the milk solids. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this into the buttermilk. And I'm going to stir it with a fork, and the warm milk together with the buttermilk, it should start to clump up from all the cold. Just make the butter go back into a solid form. And you see we're getting little clumps in there. And then that way I can just pour this directly into my dry goods and not have to worry about cutting butter into things. And still makes a nice flaky crust. See, that's all nice and clumpy. And I've given my dry ingredients a stir, so that's all well incorporated. So that's pretty good. So all those little individual globules of butter is what's going to sit in the flour and give us the crumb that we want in this biscuit. Into my flour. It has all the other baked goods in there. And what you want to be careful with anytime you're doing soft things, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time building up gluten in the flour. And we do that by over mixing. So I really just want to incorporate this mixture until I get a soft dough. And when we turn it out to actually start forming the biscuits, that's where we also kind of run into trouble with spending a little much time with the flour, making it tough. We don't want tough biscuits, we want soft biscuits. So just sort of giving this a little bit of a, making sure I get all those little dry spots that like to hide on the bottom. See all that? And if you find that it's still a little too wet and it's not coming quite together, just like with cinnamon rolls and other bread products, you just add flour about a tablespoon at a time. And try not to do more than about 1/4 cup. If you end up having to put in more than 1/4 cup, something has gone wrong with your recipe. You can also just use, working the dough to try to get some more flour into it if it's a little too sticky. I don't really like my hands getting super, super dirty when I'm working with doughs, even though it's inevitable. So what I'm going to end up doing here is giving this a little bit of a knead, not a whole lot. Get most of that out of there. Okay. Get my hands nice and floury and just start pressing this a little bit and doing a little bit of a fold. And what I'm actually going to do, so I can actually get a few layers in these biscuits, is press it out really gently, because I'm going to fold this 3 times. So I'm gonna do a fold from this direction and brush off some of that flour. And then fold this from this side like a little envelope. Give it a little bit of a press. And that's all we really need. Like, I see that it's already kind of come together a little bit, so I'm gonna get rid of some of this excess flour. So I just need a little bit there so that I can shape these. And shaping these, you can use a biscuit cutter if you want round biscuits. I don't mind a square biscuit. That way you just really need a knife. I just have to be careful because I've cut through one of these silicone mats before using a knife to cut my biscuits. And I don't want to do that again. So maybe I'll use a cutter today. I haven't made up my mind yet. But I'm basically going to press this down until it's about like here, about 1 inch high. And then cut out as many as I can, and still trying very much not to work the dough too much. So I'm going to cut it out, and the pieces that are left over will press together. I did decide to go ahead and do some squares. I'm just going to use my bench knife. There's less chance of me cutting through my silicone mat with it. And because I'm a bit of a nerd, I will cut off a little bit of the edges so that I have a perfect square. And those I'll just press back together when I get to my next set of biscuits. You don't have to be this nerdy about it. It's going to be delicious no matter what shape they are. So what I'll do, like usual, is I'll cut something in half. And then I'll cut in half again. Maybe those are too big of a biscuits. I don't think so. But you might cut them again to get a little bit smaller biscuits, and maybe I will. It's the height really that's going to determine how long these cook, and I'm just putting these on some parchment paper. And the oven is at 450 degrees. And I just want to give them a little bit of room to grow. Again, in the interest of working the dough very little, I think the square one really helps because you don't have a whole bunch of like little pieces from in between the circles to kind of push back together. All I have really left to make into a biscuit are these little scraps, and I don't have to work them very much. Usually when you make homemade biscuits, there's going to be that last biscuit who's going to look a little bit weird because it was made of leftovers. So I just really want to press this together a little bit. And honestly, because of some of the flour that's in between some of these pieces, this might be a bit of a pull apart biscuit, but I'm just going to pat it and shape it a little bit.
Make it a heart.
We can make it a heart. We'll make a little heart, maybe. It's a little bit difficult, but.
Make a love biscuit.
A love biscuit. Even though I'm no good at that. That looks weird, but whatever. I do have a heart cut out somewhere, don't I? I don't know.
Yeah.
There. Little heart biscuit. So here are our finished biscuits. They got a little color on them. And I'm gonna brush these with a little bit of melted butter and make some eggs and eat this. So I couldn't wait. I started eating them before the eggs were done. But I just want to say, the inside is nice and tender and fluffy. Then it got a nice little crumb on there. And it's just delicious. You can have this with some jelly. You can make some sausage gravy or some mushroom gravy, or just have it with some eggs and some fruit. It's good stuff. I'm gonna eat it.
Nope.
Ready?
I have you boobs up. Boobs up in the frame.
Okay. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Are we recording?
I have been for 12 seconds.